these are very, very tiring times for a lot of people, whether we have bought into the coronavirus hoax or whether we have decided to do our own thing. It doesn't mean that we're impervious to it or immune from it. And indeed, many of us are still in recovery from mistreatment that many of us have had throughout our lives. It's what makes us free thinkers, it's what makes us shamans, if you like, or makes us a bit different. We have to forgive nobody other than ourselves. Forgiveness is a gaslit concept, rather like the concept of, psychopathology, which has been latched onto by so many psychopaths. The only person in the world you have to forgive is yourself. You don't have to forgive anybody else. They can sort it out in their own heads. But Thomas Sheridan had 2 posts on Facebook, and I'm going to read them out in truncated form and respond to them because they interested me a lot. The first thing he says is, I am pretty certain that all establishment politicians claiming to be outraged by the lockdown are all controlled opposition to make us believe we have dissident voices in government. I do not believe any of these. Sorry. And the second one is a screenshot of somebody else's post somewhere else where they're asked a question. Do you respond to people who say what you are saying is dangerous simply because they blindly follow what they've been told while science is proven wrong over and over again? It's absolutely absurd. And the person in Thomas's screenshot replies, how do I respond? I usually don't, because there's a force on this planet trying to literally kill the dumbest and most stupid of the human herd. To interfere with that at times isn't wise. This force is powerful, well connected, and can reach out to anyone who interferes with the death energy it requires to live. Vaccines and all toxic medicines are literally a test. If you're too dumb to understand that poisons will make you sick and that injecting poison into your blood will make you the most sick, do you really think I'm going to be able to talk sense into that person? The dumb people are dying by the boatload and will not survive because they're too stunned to understand that poisons can't heal. Poisons don't work like that. I'm a powerful word magician, but there's a strength of stupidity, ignorance and indoctrination that even I can't penetrate. The meek will not inherit the earth, the intelligent will. Power to the people smart enough to understand exactly what's going on here. That's interesting. I'm pro-vax, so anybody who's listening who wants to start calling me an anti-vaxxer, don't. I'm pro-vax, but the problem with the vaccines that are being peddled left, right and centre at this moment in time, in relation to COVID-19, is that there's not enough time, at least ostensibly, to say that they've been tested or that they're safe or dangerous. That's why I'm not getting vaccinated. I have been vaccinated. I've had loads of vaccines all my life since I was a baby. I'm still here. I've had fluoride. I'm still here. I smoke cigarettes. I'm still here. So poisons are put into our bodies all the time, and since we're babies. But the issue isn't the poison. The issue is the amount and the dilution, and what it's put in relation to anything else. Caffeine is a poison if you take it in a strong enough dose. Nicotine is a poison if you take it in a strong enough dose. They'll kill you if you take them in a strong enough dose. Alcohol. It's a poison. We put that, or many people put that into their bodies. I haven't in 17 years. But I think that second thing that I read out there ties into something that I could have told you about. That we're being tested. Because it happened with the mask thing in August of 2020, in which I said this is a test. This is to see who will actually read the statute, who will know how to construe it properly, and who will know how to assert their rights. Nobody will tell you your rights. So if you look at what we call in Ireland citizens' advice. Yes, citizens' advice. All that citizens' advice tells you is how to comply with the system. How to be of the system as well as being in it. If you think citizens' advice tells you your rights, then you're very, very naive. No more than Amnesty International does now. Amnesty International is a very, very heavily funded NGO here in Ireland. And it's peddling woke doctrine. Because any independent body in favour of free speech would have fought out very strongly against Ireland's most recent hurt feelings laws, well, the hate speech laws are ostensibly called, whereas Amnesty International supported them. In other words, Amnesty International supports censorship of opinions that certain people in power do not like. That means Amnesty International is part of the establishment. It's no longer what it was set up for. Amnesty was set up with the noblest of aims to report, one, on police state activity in repressive regimes. We have a repressive regime now. And two, on people who had been illegally incarcerated, particularly journalists or those who were illegally incarcerated for disseminating or for being a whistleblower. Thomas then talks, the first post of his that I read out is talking about, be sceptical of people who are in the establishment criticising the lockdown, absolutely. I do not believe any member of the Irish Parliament, the Dáil or the Seanad, is anything other than an establishment politician, and anything they may be saying is controlled opposition. There's a reason for that. They all got into the Dáil and Seanad in February or thereabouts of 2020. The Seanad election was a bit later. Then, after that, COVID-19 came along. Not one of those politicians who might be, at least in an Irish context, criticising the lockdown or criticising any of this is saying what the actual big picture of it is. That the lockdown was completely unjustified and has done huge damage to a huge amount of our population here. Secondly, that the mainstream media that we should have trusted to at least ask critical questions completely shut down its critical faculty and has spent from then up to now, and continuing to do so, just peddling the government line. Now, there have been a few strange articles in today's Irish Times, but that's because the Irish Times is not state subsidised, although they're now trying to angle for that to happen with Micheál Martin. Micheál Martin is a scumbag, absolutely vile piece of rubbish Micheál Martin is. I resigned from Fianna Fáil when he became leader, and I'm glad I did. I had the foresight. Dreadful individual, Micheál Martin. When the lockdown ends, and when the COVID-19 thing eventually ends, and I predict it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. I predict we're in Europe 1940 at the moment, when Hitler had just taken over France. Don't forget it took another 5 years to beat Hitler. When it ends, it won't be over, and there won't be anybody who's genuinely anti-establishment who is not calling for a retrospective inquiry into what happened. In other words, we have to examine what Varadkar did, what Harris did, what Holohan did, what O'Neill did, what Martin did. We have to look back at it and forensically and objectively examine what they did and whether their judgment was right, what the RTE TV stars did, what the 81 golfers did. That all has to be assessed objectively. Maybe it'll take somebody bringing a civil action against the state. The proper way. Not funding. But only when that happens can we be sure that we're dealing with somebody who's honest. So when you have independent TDs who are coming out with criticism that objectively and just taken in its own terms is accurate and valid, you must ask, are they calling for what I've just said there? That there has to be a retrospective inquiry into how all of this happened and how it was allowed. We then need to look at RTE and their culpability, and the Irish Times and their culpability. We must look at the fact that John Williams, the head of news and current affairs in RTE, is photographed attending a function in RTE for a colleague who was retiring during a level 5 lockdown last year. We must look at the behaviour of the Gardaí. We must look at the people who decided that they would police trains to see who would be allowed to travel within their own country. In other words, people are using, some of the tinfoil hatters are talking about the Nuremberg trials. They're actually right. It has to be as extensive and as retrospective as the Nuremberg trials were. That's why I don't hear any member of the Seanad or any member of the Dáil calling for that. If they're calling for that, that means they're anti-establishment. If they're not, that means they're not. It is, I'm afraid, as simple as that. A new generation of politicians will step up to the plate, and I don't mean the likes of Gemma O'Doherty. I mean centre-ground people who've been damaged very badly by what's happened will step forward and be saying, no, that's not good enough. Now, we're going to run for the Dáil and ask questions about what's going on here. Martin Feely described the way the likes of Holohan and O'Neill speak ex cathedra. What he means is they do, and Varadkar, they do these publicity shoots for the RTE 6-1 news, and nobody asks them any questions. Everything they say is treated as if it's, the Ten Commandments coming down from heaven. That's literally it. Nobody questions them. Last week we had Clareburn Live with people in bubbles. Last night we had the Garda Commissioner threatening people on the Late Late Show. I don't know. I don't watch that rubbish. I was in the studio audience for Clareburn Live in early 2018. I saw enough then. But when you have politicians running for election who are saying we're going to do a retrospective inquiry into what happened from at least February 2020 onwards, if not earlier than that, because I think there's a lot of questions to be asked about what was going on in the few years before then. When they come along, they're for real. Give them your number one vote. Support them. But not until then. Now let's get on to Thomas's... No, just to get back briefly to this. The present set of members of the Oireachtas, the Dáil and Seanad, are part of the establishment. They are part of the old order, whether they even know it or not. They are part of the old order. Because the next general election in Ireland will be very interesting to see if the cheesebrains continue to support these people who've ruined their country and ruined their prospects. And that's what's happened. For nothing. Neil Ferguson's a liar. Jim O'Doherty and John Waters brought a court case and they didn't approach it very well and they came out with a lot of unfounded claims. But somebody else is going to do it the right way. They will. They will. Don't forget, though, that you don't have standing to bring a court case of that in practice, unless you can show you've been damaged in some way. A lot of people have been damaged and they're not going to shut their mouths so much longer. So we hear the term a great reset, and funnily enough, we can turn it back on them. Yes, we can turn it back on them. The reset in Ireland, politically, will be when this present bunch of politicians who are presently in the Dáil and Seanad, this current bunch, are replaced by people who are asking questions about the Great Reset and about what happened in Ireland from February 2020 onwards. Roisin Shortall for the Social Democrats, who are kind of just a watered-down trot party, they're just a politer version of the Trots, was calling for an even more draconian lockdown. Rayada Cronin of Sinn Féin was calling for the persecution and blacklisting of a doctor who conscientiously objected to giving the COVID-19 vaccine. They must not be forgotten as being on the wrong side of history. They are the woke globalists. Roisin's great. Roisin is great. No, she's not, I'm afraid. And we need to begin getting more rude to our politicians and less subservient and less polite. This is something I observed myself and Hope. That would get rude emails from people asking me about judicial reviews I brought. I wouldn't reply because they wouldn't dare send such a rude email to, an elected public representative. Oh no, they send it to me, a private citizen. And when we have turned that particular thing in its head, when people are starting to get aggressive and rude to politicians and demanding of politicians rather than demanding of a private civilian on the dole who lives with his elderly parents, then a change has happened. But I'm not that optimistic. On the other hand, though, when the destitution bites, really does seriously bite, when the money runs out and the subsidies run out and all this kind of thing, when people realise that all of their businesses have gone. The only reason why they haven't is because RTE is continuing to tell lies. That's the only reason. But I look back to 10 years ago and how much things have changed. And I mean, they've changed drastically, radically, top to bottom here in 10 years. How people are now, how so many more people are calling out this and saying, no, RTE are liars. The RTE brand, particularly in 2020, but I saw it coming, since John Williams took over in 2016 particularly, the RTE brand is now rubbish. The RTE brand is mud. Their name is mud. Particularly after the party for the retiring charge hand. Those people who went to that party and got photographed brought the brand name of RTE into formal disrepute. They haven't been punished for it. So what does that say to you? Dealing with his second post, What he's really saying is that don't give a sucker an even break. That's right. That's right. Is this a big test? Of course it is. Of course it is. As I said, I wanted to get a doctor's certificate for not wearing a mask, and then I was told I didn't need one. So I wrote to the chief guard in charge of Dublin, and I said, here's the situation. The doctor said I don't need a mask. I'm not going to have an argument with the doctor, so that's final. And if anybody prosecutes me, I'll say I tried to get a doctor's cert and couldn't get it. Evidently, I'm not supposed to get one. So are we going to have a situation where people who are prosecuted and weren't able to provide evidence in the bus, or what have you, are they going to be able to claim a mistrial because the Gardaí demanded evidence that they weren't lawfully entitled to? This is a test. It is a test. It is a test to see who will read the system and who will know what to do. I'm thinking of times in the supermarket and in other places where people have attempted to reprimand me for not wearing a mask. What kind of person does that? What kind of person does that? Would think that they have the right to harass another member of the public. Okay, it's all right for a member of staff to say, excuse me, why are you not wearing a mask? I've got an exemption. Oh, that's okay. That's the answer I've always given, and that's the reply I've always got. Sometimes, do you mind waiting outside and we'll serve you out the door? That's fine by me. Or, do you mind waiting outside until everybody else has gone? That's fine by me. I'd rather just wait outside and you can serve me now, though. All right. I was reported to the Gardaí, as I've said repeatedly, on the 12th of December. Somebody called the Gardaí and nothing happened. So, this is a test. This is sorting the straw from the chaff. This is seeing who can actually say no. And we're seeing the extent to which so many Irish men are so pathetic, so weak, so incapable. Although I remember that from my school days. They could never say no. They could never stand up for themselves. And it is a test. Of course it's a test. Will people read the law correctly and see that there's no burden of proof? That you don't have to get a doctor's cert? That nobody is entitled to demand evidence from you? Not even the Gardaí. They're not entitled to demand evidence from you if you're not wearing a mask. In other words, you're entitled to be taken on your word and you set your own rules. That's what it says. That's what it means. Any experienced barrister will tell you that. What an experienced barrister will tell you is that when you're reading statute or regulations, don't just look for what it includes, but with the same, easily the same degree of importance, look for what it excludes. I have found that my degree of sympathy for general people has plummeted in the past 12 months, but particularly it flatlined after the mask thing. I don't see them as human. Really, I don't see them as human. These ones in the shops who think they've the right to accost and berate me. The one who called the police on me for not wearing a mask. It's... to an extent I saw this coming. From 2012 I saw this coming. But it's extreme, isn't it? It's extreme what we're witnessing. You know, because... I remember in communication, online with Thomas, we were saying there's a fracture taking place. We're not going to be reconciled with them. We're actually not. So this is why it's very important, when it all ends, that we do have a Nuremberg, or a Nuremberg equivalent. That's not being tinfoil hat or D-wall. D-wall. After you are, here's in the house. Yeah. No, that's not that kind of thing. Because there's no going back from what happened in 2020. There's no going back from somebody calling the Gardaí maliciously on me after being already told by the manager that I had permission not to wear a mask. He called the Gardaí anyway. I hope for his sake he's not relying on me for his life. That he's not suddenly stuck in an emergency situation and I'm the one person who can pull him out of the river kind of thing. When law and order breaks down. Thomas says it. This is the greatest lesson you will ever have. Oh, it is. But it's only a lesson if you're willing to learn.